Good evening. Welcome to Subversive Live. Tolly, you've become a familiar face. What's up?
Hello, sir. I'm doing very well. How are you today?
Good. Did you have a subversive kind of day?
Man, you know what I was doing today.
Well,
there's got to be some days that you just say, I'm out. So I went out today.
And this isn't exactly the most relaxing organization and subject. It's kind of like everything we deal with is kind of like life and death and so serious. So
yeah, and people have opinions. Did you realize that people have opinions when you speak?
No, I didn't. I had no idea. I didn't have it.
Yeah, and they don't mind sharing them, so that's enjoyable.
Did you see the quote that Dr. King's daughter said? That she said in 1967 there was a poll taken in America and Dr. King was voted the most hated man in America. So I think we're doing pretty good, Tolly.
There you go.
We're not even close to that. But welcome to Subversive Institute. And this is an organization to try to equip and empower citizens, Baltimore City, and the nation. Give them practical things, so you can change your community, your city, make a difference. We're all about change. We believe that all sociological good comes from the bottom up. And we just believe that social revolution is different than social reformation. Revolution seeks to replace. Reformation works within the systems and structures. And Tolly, the world is different even from the last time we did this.
Yeah, it's true.
Very different.
Very much.
Yeah, last time we were together, we talked about 10 things you can do to bring about change. We only made it through the first 5, and we're going to hit up the 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Number 1 was commit to doing whatever it takes to change any law that creates an environment for injustice. Any law. There are laws on the book that facilitate injustice, and we got to change those things, like in the Aubrey case. It's legal in Georgia to arrest a person as a common citizen. Number 2, vote regularly and differently. And Tolly, we really try to expand on that about how it's not enough just to show up and vote anymore. I know you get a sticker and you feel good, but if you vote for the same people, same policies and principles, you get the same things.
But the good news is you offered to send people stickers if that's what they're in this game for.
Well, I mean, yeah, actually, I think we said we would actually offer them stickers if they didn't vote for the same people.
Exactly.
And if they didn't vote at all, because I think it's better to not vote at all. I know that's going to people are going to get all mad, but it's like, if you're voting for the same people, we become complicit. Number 3, redirect our emotions, energy, words, posts, behaviors towards actions that will actually create substantive change. Redirection, so that we're not wasting energy. I talked about this on a recent forum about all the energy that's on the George Floyd, Tolly, and we just want to capture that energy, don't we not? And we just want to point that at subversive things so that a year from now, the police department in Minneapolis looks different. Sounds different, feels different. That's number 3. Number 4, participate in fiscal, institutional, and organizational boycotts because, it is what it is. And number 5, replace defective systems and structures. Remember, replacing them. You can't fix everything. You can't reform everything. You can't Band-Aid and talk your way through and out of everything. So number 6, run for local, state, and federal office. What do you think about that, Tolly, as a way to actually create change?
Yeah, I think it's genuinely a great first step for some people out there. There's some people watching that have the pedigree, they have the background, they have the experience, they have the trust of their neighbors. As you said on the last episode, we could pick a random 15 people to run the city, and we feel like they would make better decisions than those that are engaged in the political process and wanting to work their way up, people that just care about the city. And so there are a lot of people out there that right now could go in and start the process because the reality is that that's going to be a first step. is to be able to get in, look at the system, and affect change from within, so that you can have generational change after that. But we need some people to step up.
You know, Tali, you've really done a good job encouraging others and trying to encourage me to run. I don't know. I think I'm too rebellious. But here's the thing. One of the things that you've encouraged me by, well, two things. One, you've showed me statistically like how possible it is for citizens to actually get into office. And two, you've showed me that like, no, it's actually, you don't have, you know, because I said to someone today, one thing I told them, I said, one of the things that Tali has taught me is that politicians try to convince us that they know more than us, and we need to just trust them and then pay them to do the same job over and over and over and over again, which accomplishes no results. And so that's something you've encouraged me. And you've thrown around some statistics about like just in our city, it's probably true of all cities in terms of how many votes it takes. I think one time, I think maybe even last time you said it was like 3,000 votes or something like that.
Yeah, I can hit them up for you a little bit. So out of the 14 races, and then of course you have mayor. Right now, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the seats were won at 33% of the vote in the primary or less. And so that means, you know, they got to anywhere between 24, 27%, 33, 29, 33. That's what they won in their primary. And then that bumped them into the general. And because the general is a political general in our city, that just means you run unopposed, essentially. So if you can win your primary in Baltimore City, then you have, it's almost impossible for you to lose in the general. And as a result, so we have a third of the seats. Think about this, Mike, a third of the power. They are in office without garnering more than a third of their community votes to their cause. And so that means that 2/3 of their local community voted against them in the primary. However, once they got to the general, they're running unopposed because we run in a political format. So as a consequence, it's not incredibly crazy. You have one of the reps is at 2196, 2,000 votes. Got this person into office. Another one at 3,700, another at 2,200, 3,100, and 2,600. And you're talking that's a third of the electorate. So that means that there are, go ahead and double all of that. That's how many people are sitting out there every single time they run that are voting for the other guy. And so it's important that we realize that this stuff is not out of reach. It's not rocket science. It's meeting your neighbors, asking them what's going on, what they want to see changed, shaking hands, caring about your local school system, getting out and just making your presence known in your community. But there's 2/3 opposed to 5 of them, as I see right here.
Yeah, that's such good news. And so I just think it's awesome. So, and one of the things behind this is people always asking, what can I do to change? Well, you know, you've heard the little proverb, you can be part of the problem or part of the solution. But what's not acceptable is just complain. And, you know, that's part of, I just wrote something too about 12 ways you can stop and minimize police brutality. And one of those ways is become a police officer and model the behavior that you are so longing for. People sometimes don't like that, but the same thing with politics. Like, all politicians are corrupt. All of them are about money. Are you? No, then run. All right, number 7, create, cultivate, and cooperate with organizations and institutions that are subversive in nature. Create them, cultivate, and cooperate with organizations and institutions that are subversive in nature. So the key here is subversive in nature. Get with organizations that are really about change. Now, Tali, to me, tell me what you think. I think there's organizations and cities that do good maintenance work. They do good catch work. But then there's other organizations in city that do very catalytic, subversive work. And we need both, right? So like a hospital is not really subversive. It's really more maintenance, right? So YMCA, not really subversive, maybe when it was conceived. But organizations like Subversive and others, I think those types of organizations are really poised to change. And if you can't find one, Start one.
Yeah, we have a lot of creative juices in Baltimore. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. If you're viewing, you have to recognize that that's part of the strength of our city is our diversity, our quirkiness, if you will. There's a lot of different pockets and elements, but the reality is that they're creative, and we've just got to simply aim that creativity towards making our lives better, towards making our neighbors' lives better, community lives better. And as we spoke about in the first episode of this series here, we just talked about the fact that education is so important. And you want to get with the people that are basically taking the information from the ivory tower and bringing it down to the common folks. So if the common man can understand that, look, you only need to get 2,000 people on your side. I spoke last episode, but the reality is if you get 2,500 people in a neighborhood, you got a council seat. If you teach about the grading policies in your local school, you could affect change in your local school. So we have people that they go around and they're essentially an arm of the current administration or current government, and they'll take they'll take the food or they'll take the resources, turn around and redistribute it. But that's not the kind of thing we're talking about. That's great. It's loving, it's caring, it's compassionate. But when you're receiving funds from the city or the state or the county, whatever it is, when you're receiving funds, you're automatically less likely to challenge the institutional authority. And so we don't mean challenge in terms of taking anybody's heads off, but we're talking about the fact that we have to hit it where it hurts. And for a politician, that's the ballot box. For a wayward company, that's the bottom line. And so these are things that we need to channel our creativity towards tackling these problems, and not just handing out sandwiches that we got from the local, mayor's office or councilman's office.
Yeah. And I think that I think that's good. And I think, organizations, some organizations do a little bit of both. They're a little bit more maintenance and they're a little bit subversive. Like Center for Urban Families has a maintenance aspect to it, but also a little bit of a subversive edge to it, as it seeks to really go after African American men and really push the fatherhood envelope on that. And as a result, not only getting men good jobs and education and dealing with criminal records and expungement, but really positioning men not just at the lower levels, but in medium to higher levels of jobs, so that they can actually, and so partner with an organization like that. You can see that, wow, one man gets affected by that kind of change, impacts their whole family, and then that family ends up impacting a neighborhood, and all of a sudden you have generational chains that are broken. That's subversive in nature. It is. And so there's just one example, as Colleen asked about what would be an example. Number 8, when you see something, say something, and when you see injustice, do something. Now, I've gotten in trouble for this one because I also put this on my website for Subversive Institute, 12 things you can do to minimize and stop police brutality. But I said, Tolly, that I've just gotten to the point where I don't think we should watch another African-American man get killed by a police officer. And so when we say, when you see something, say something, and when you see injustice, do something, like stop it. And I just think that if we're talking about 10 things you can do to bring about change, this might be the most important thing on the list of 10, like the most important. And that is actually be willing to do something. And I know, Tolly, you and Colleen, and you guys have been down there working. I know you guys have been really involved in this type of a work where you see something, you just don't sit back and preach sermons, do all this kind of stuff, but you're actually in there risking and being aggressive and doing something to actually see change.
Yeah, I just don't understand people on one side that, like you said, they tolerate and continue to live in the same problem over and over again. I don't understand that mentality when you could speak up and make change. I also don't understand the mentality of shouting from the distance or behind a keyboard. And so, yeah, we're blessed, whether it's in East Baltimore and the work we're doing there, or even in Africa. I took a visit in East Africa and looked around, and there's no school. The kids have to walk 3 miles to get to school. And we were like, we're going to build a school. And we didn't have the money for it, Mike. We didn't have the infrastructure. The 501c3 wasn't set up. We just said it needs to happen. And too many of us, we understand in our heart that injustices are everywhere we look. And you cannot fix every single thing. But I really believe that if you would have your mind and your heart open, that you'll have that gentle nudge that just says, this is the thing that you need to change. And if each one of us would take that mentality for our own neighborhoods, if each one of us would take that mentality for our district or our city, you would see a change in the city. I was talking to a friend the other day that is very heavily involved in the political scene. And he said, Tolly, you don't realize I was sitting down with a state senator, and he had one position that was going in a whole certain direction. And he got one letter from a citizen, one letter that was just demanding, you're going to hear from me and you will know my name if you vote this way. And that's an idea of just when you see something wrong, when you see an injustice, speak up. Don't just sit back and let the world happen to you. Go and happen to the world.
Yeah, I remember we were at a kind of a community meeting for a school, Baltimore City school, and the principal got up and talked about how under-resourced they were, and the community technologies teacher got up, the computer teacher got up and talked about how, there was one computer for every 200 students or something like that. And they were talking about how all the platforms are moving online and the kids don't have internet at home and they don't have their own computers. And I just remember thinking about this, see something, say something, see an injustice. That's an injustice. So here we are. So my wife and I looked at each other and we met the guy afterwards and we said, hey, find a child and let's get them a computer. Like, I think it's not about like trying to save everybody. It's about if you see something, actually do something. And, you and I get a lot of our values from the Bible. And we've got this story that most people are familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I just want to remind people again that the context of the Good Samaritan is a crime scene. There is a road. There is a man who was robbed and beaten, and he's laying there dying. And the priest walks by and the Levite walks by and the Samaritan does not walk by. He saw something, he did something, he saw something, he said something, he used the resources he had to save that man's life. And Jesus said, which one of these guys loved their neighbor? The one who stopped and helped. And so I think if we really want to see change, you don't have to go about like some kind of para-police. You just have to live your life. And when you see an injustice in the grocery store, when you see it at the post office, when you see it in the line at Chick-fil-A, or you see it wherever you see it in the community, what would it be like in Baltimore, in all of our cities, especially now? What would it have been like on that day, that fateful day where George Floyd was arrested, if somebody who saw something would have done something? And I just think we need to change that narrative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we mentioned, but George Floyd, there were 3 other police officers standing right there, 2 of them with their knee on his back. And you talk about subversive. You talk about get inside the police force and do something. These are the people that were closest and had the chance to do it. There's just no excuse for it. And I do believe you're going to see charges drawn up, which it should. It should have been done instantly. But here we are. And but none of us, we have to be careful because we too could become that person that allows our passivity to allow bad things to happen. The other thing about your story is there's a racial component there too. The Samaritan didn't have business doing it. When you go down that list, you had all these people that were more supposed to step in, supposed to be involved. And that's the attitude that we often have. But we have to take on that of the Samaritan that says, look, they're my brother, they're my sister. Mike, I don't know if you over in the comments, Sheila's asking, hey, with all of these rioters jumping in the middle of peaceful protests and starting the problem, should the rioters or should the peaceful protesters simply back away from their cause? I would address this. There's a video I saw that's the perfect way, in my opinion, to handle this. But the other last night before, there was this skinny white dude with green hair, and he was breaking up the concrete on the sidewalk to create little chunks of brick to throw. And when he started breaking it up, the peaceful protesters around him, now they were fired up, they're screaming, they're not happy, but they looked over and they saw this skinny little dude, breaking up bricks. And about 4 of them jumped this dude and grabbed him, and they gave him to the police officers. And they were like, hey, take this fool out of here. And frankly, I think that's the most effective way of doing it. You don't have to stay home. You don't have to quit raising your voice. But we do need 4, 5, 6 dudes that says, hey, get out of here, man. You're gonna cause a problem for me. And unfortunately, we're seeing that. I sent you a video earlier today, Mike, of some white dudes driving around handing out bricks. Like, what is wrong with you people? Yeah. So no, I just think good people need to speak up, and the bad will settle down.
Who is the one who said all evil needs to prosper is for good men to do nothing?
Mm-hmm.
And so, number 9, act and execute on this phrase in the Declaration of Independence. It's sad, Tolly, that most people don't know what this phrase in the Declaration of Independence says. It says, when any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Whenever any form of government, would that include Baltimore City? I think so. Would that include Minneapolis? I think so. Mm-hmm. Would that include Chicago and Atlanta? And what would it include? Yeah, I think so. When it becomes destructive to these ends, what ends? Life. That means they aren't protecting life. They aren't cultivating life. They aren't creating an environment where you can flourish, where it can grow. Mm-hmm. Liberty. That's called, what's liberty, Tolly? We got to clear this up, because I think a lot of Americans don't know what liberty is.
Yeah, it's freedom, the ability to make your own decisions, live your own life, be left alone by other people.
And pursuit of happiness. The Declaration was founded on these things. It says it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. This is people say, well, how'd you come up with this thing with Subversive Institute? Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Declaration of Independence is a subversive document.
Yeah.
Like, read it.
There wasn't supposed to be a political class, Mike, and I'm not sure if people understand that in the United States of America. There was not supposed to be the way that we have it. George Washington led the way, at least he felt that he was. They were used to, at that time, a king situation. And in fact, they wanted to call him His Excellency. And so he backed all of that off, and then he voluntarily limited his terms. And in doing so, he was setting the example to say, listen, we're not supposed to live in a political structure where there are political people that know more than everyone else and control everyone else at all times. We're supposed to live in a representative democracy where constantly coming up from the neighborhoods are new voices, new people, new thought that get involved in the system, and it will gradually but constantly be in a state of change, addressing the current issues. But if you look, we have a political class. And so if you break in and you can hold down the fort, then you end up sitting there for a long time. And you don't have to, when you're, people have to understand this, Mike, when you don't have to worry about where your votes are coming from, and when you don't have to worry about the citizens challenging you for your seat, you do not have to listen to the citizens.
Right.
And as a result, we just back away, and we're letting these people live in a political class that is above everyone else. And we've become very comfortable with a political class that says, do as I say, but not as I do.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, we've said this before. America loves the fact that we were founded on a revolution, but America doesn't want any more revolutions.
Yeah.
America basically said the state we were in was not perfect, so we rebelled. We participated in revolution to create something better, and now we act like we don't need any more revolutions. Tolly, does the Constitution have amendments?
No, absolutely.
So the Constitution can be amended, right?
Yes, it can.
Is there an amendment in the Constitution that says we can't amend the Constitution anymore? Do you mean it's amendable? Like
There's
today,
laziness. Yes, there's laziness on the part of the governed.
that's right. So we have basically taken our hands off the steering wheel. And remember what we've always said, voting was designed to give the voiceless a voice. So but it doesn't do any good if you just keep voting for the same people. And now they've served for 33 years in a district in Baltimore City, and it's got high crime, poor education, lack of economic opportunity. The justice system is failing. The police department is failing. And then you guys buy the lie that it's Trump's fault, it's Obama's fault, it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault. No, it's that person's fault. Get them out. Like, get them out. And I see some of you talking about term limits. Amen. You don't want career politicians, but let's talk about this for a second, okay? It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Tali, doesn't that mean that the people therefore have the ability to do that? That means that we're governed by a document that can change. So, we could actually change our local Baltimore and our national governing documents and actually put term limits in.
Yeah,
we can do that.
We've got to turn the heat up, Mike, on people. You can't leave people in these seats. They don't have, there's an inherent bias that they hold by being in the seat and by being with the perks. I mentioned last week that all of our local politicians, they sit where you don't sit at the football game. They sit where you don't sit down at Camden Yards. And they enjoy that. And so as a result, when people are enjoying the pomp and circumstance that surrounds the position, they don't have it in them to make change. It has to be that the citizens wake up and decide it's going to be different. I love the fact that people are speaking up. I love the fact that people are out. Somebody needs to be out there with voter registration cards today. And if you had to have a voter registration card to be able to protest, I think you would have, unfortunately, a lot less at the beginning. But I bet we could have a real effective protest going forward.
Yeah, and here's the thing: what would happen? And I mean, this is a little bit hijacky in language. What would happen if we could mobilize 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 people in one day to go knock on doors, to sign petitions for term limits?
Mm-hmm.
What if we could get Baltimore? We'll just pick Baltimore, right? Baltimore has 600,000 people. What if we could get 60,000 people to sign a petition for term limits in Baltimore City?
Yeah.
What if we could get Americans, 10% of Americans, because that's way more than the people that actually participate, that say, hey, we want term limits. We don't want people in Congress for 35 years. We don't. You can serve 6 years and you're out. We want to take the presidential term. That should be one term. This whole lame duck thing and run to the second term, then you can do all this crazy stuff. Just you get one term and you get out. But to your point, in the way to do this is by the citizenry being mobilized. So the power to change our country is in the hands of the people. And so if we don't change it, I'm not buying like a lot of blaming people. That's the easy road out. So blame the president, blame Congress, blame the politicians. What's ironic is today I was having a conversation with some friends of mine, and they said, well, what would you do? And I said, I think we need to get rid of the office of mayor and the chief of police. And they said, well, what would you do? I said, I like the city council districts, but I think we should have them and they should all be volunteered and stipend. And they said, well, if you didn't pay them full time, who would run? And you know what I said, Tali? I said, people who really want and love Baltimore, who aren't in it for the money. And they were like, imagine that. You'd get real representation.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're supposed to have, Tali? People who are like, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm not doing it for the boxes. I'm not doing it for the medical insurance. I'm not doing it for my pension. And we got to be reminded of something, Tali. This whole lockdown, no matter where you sit with this, that these politicians who participated and facilitated the lockdown, they're not impacted by that. These are all rich people.
No.
They're all rich, Tali. They're not impacted. They still get to keep their jobs. They can go to work. They can teleport. They can do all this stuff. They are not economically impacted at all. Wouldn't you rather have someone, Tolly, who if they voted for something, they were impacted? And I'll say this and then give it to you. This is what I believe. I believe human nature is so fragile that for most people, if you're not impacted by the legislation you're voting for, there is a high probability that you're going to be short-sighted in initiating that stuff. What do you think, Tom?
I think life works in theory. That people pass policy and law. And here's the thing too, Mike. A lot of the laws that are getting passed, they're written by other people. They're written by interest groups and things like that. And a lot of the time, legislators hardly even take time to read the stuff. But Fauci, for instance, I don't know if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, Fauci was exposed to the vice president's spokesperson, and she came down with COVID. So Fauci and a couple of others took 2 weeks of quarantine, voluntary quarantine. So Fauci was in a week after he was in quarantine in his house. I'm not, go look it up. You can fact check me all you want. A week after Fauci was in quarantine himself, he comes out and now he's talking about the side problems that come up because of people being isolated and alone in their homes.
Exactly.
Like, bro, what do you think the rest of America's been dealing with? The Michigan governor goes up to her lake house. The Cuomo's brother gets a banned medicine that's off the charts. They're over here talking about hydroxychloroquine, but he's taken one that was actually banned. And so it's crazy. Cuomo had a visit with the president last week. Tell me why the rest of America has to run their offices on Zoom, but the governor of New York has to fly down to go say hi to the president. Come on. We need to realize that we're getting played, and it's time that enough citizens step up and say, you know what, we're going to make some change. And if you don't like it, you can leave, but we're coming through now. And frankly, a lot of these young people that are out tonight, my hope, my prayer for them is that they would look and they would say, listen, I'm counting on a certain group of people to educate me on how I can go about overthrowing this system. And the reality is they're withholding this and keeping it out as though it is not attainable, because they don't really want me involved in the process. They want me out here screaming, but they don't want me to come down to council meetings. They don't want me to come to the local community associations and make some change. They don't want me to actually get involved, because I don't know if you know, on social media, Mike, everybody who's under 30, they have more votes than any of these politicians have access to.
Absolutely.
All they would have to do is go out and say, hey, come join me, I'm running. And you know how much change we would have overnight around here? But people need to understand there's a class system at place, and it has less to do with race. It has a lot to do with power. And the more people get educated on that, the better we'll all be.
And, you know, there's so many things we could do. For example, minimum age to run for president of the United States is 35. Who said that was law?
Well, it used to be you were almost dead.
Challenge it and change it, right?
Alfred, you were almost dead at 35 when they wrote that law. They thought that was the old man. Go look at the founders. They were anywhere between late teens and like mid 20s. Like these weren't old heads. So they wrote that law when they were like, man, 35.
We're all going to be dead by then.
35, you're about dead. Like, can you live after 35?
So here's the thing. I believe you guys have heard me say this verse before. The future's behind us. The older generation, and some of you will be offended by this in the older generation, you guys were complicit, and so were me and my generation. I'm 52, to help to complete this problem, to be complicit in this problem. So I think if we're gonna see change in this nation, it's gonna come from 20 and 30-year-olds. I really do. And if you notice something, Tolly, even in Baltimore City, the majority of people running things are 20 years old. No. 30 years old? No. 40 years old? No. Brandon Scott's one of the youngest people, right? 50 years old? No. 60-year-old? All of a sudden you're getting warm. 60, 70-year-old people run our city. And so it's time for some young blood. And so we can change those things. The issue with number 9 is, hey, you can actually change things. I think you as a citizen, you don't realize how much power you have. You don't realize when people come from other countries and they come into America, they're amazed at the liberties and the freedom that Americans do and how you can change things. Colleen says Stuckey is a good example. He has a ton of young people from East Baltimore chasing him. Where he goes or not, he's reached them because of who he is and the things he does, good or bad. But he's reaching a population that others aren't tapping. I totally agree with that, and so that's you know, that's definitely something that we need to be on. Okay, last one, Tolly. We talk about exercising our constitutional rights, and I don't even know. I don't know that. On the one hand, I think this is so simple, but when I think about exercising our constitutional rights, I mean stuff like the right that we have as citizens to abolish and to change government that isn't working the way we want it to work. I mean the freedom we have in this country to change the structures, the long-standing structures that people have had for decades. We can actually change those. We can make Congress look different, the Senate look different, the mayor look different. People are always shocked, Tolly, when I tell them, let's just do away with the office of mayor. They're like, we can't do that. Why? Why can't we do that? Well, who says that Baltimore needs a mayor? And by the way, how's that working?
Yeah.
It's not working too well. You know, who says that Baltimore has to have a police chief? Well, everyone else has a police chief. It doesn't matter. How's that working for us? We could change the way the police department is governed. We could change the police department. All it needs is the right amount of people to be catalytic, to exercise the rights that we have as American citizens, and we can actually change things. I think one of the tragedies of America is that we don't understand how powerful we are as citizens.
Yeah. Like, I believe all of it comes down to education, knowing what's available to you. And genuinely, I believe it, that if young people understood literally how much power they have in the collective, things would change. When you mentioned the age difference, one of the things that older people have is a network and relationships. And it used to be that you had to live a very long time and befriend a lot of people before you had access to a spider web of a network large enough to then go ahead and catapult yourself and make change. Today, the system is such that a tweet, a snap, an Instagram post can hit a network fast and broad and deep. And a young person of 22, 23 could end up being the one that leads us forward in this next generation. You don't have to wait your turn. I remember in an organization I was starting, I was told, you do know that most of the people that do this are 38. And I was 25 at the time. And I said, I don't care. I don't care. And at 25, you go out and you get started. So my message would be for young people, understand there's a lot of power that you have right now to affect change. You can go out and run yourself. You can grab a hold of some older guys that can help you learn the ropes or help you get there quicker. But there are a lot of opportunities available to you. And I promise you, if all you do is run and scream and shout, and if you choose to throw something, that is like a tantrum to these older guys. They know the system. They know what it's going to take, and they'll let you have your moment. But we had Freddie Gray. We had this 5 years ago, and I shed tears when the officers were indicted over Freddie Gray. But we've had 5 years, and you need to stop and say, what has happened here in the last 5 years? We currently have a mayor who says, well, I didn't shoot anybody, so it's not my problem. We have a mayor that said, you know, when it gets cold outside, hopefully people will stay home. Or when we have COVID, maybe that'll lower it. And that's not an approach that we need. We've had 5 years after the last uprising. What we need is an uprising of intellect, involvement, and an inspired young people that'll get out and make change in Baltimore City.
Yeah. And that's just exercising your constitutional right. What about re-envisioning Baltimore? What about thinking differently about the whole city? What about thinking that it doesn't always have to be this way? And I think it's entirely possible. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. 10 things you can do to bring about change, because we are all about change. I want to encourage you to follow us at the Subversive Institute on Instagram, our Facebook page. Check out our website as well under the Solutions tab, subversiveinstitute.org, and check out some of those. And always remember, we're about change. And if you don't like what we're saying, that's okay. Come up with your own stuff, get your own people, get them all together, get them out where they need to get, and make something happen. If you see something, do something. If you see something, make something happen. Thanks for joining us tonight, Tolly. And we thank you guys for coming out. All right. Peace.